Hello, good evening, and we're live. My name is Jason Grant, CEO of Integral, Redesigning Humanity. Tonight, I've got a super special guest, Anthony Pompliano, also known as Pomp on Twitter. Many of you are already waiting to view this. I'm not going to beat around the bush too much. Please, Anthony, introduce yourself, because any sort of introduction that I do is not going to do you justice. So please give us like a quick synopsis of who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you inviting me. Yeah, I run a investment firm, Full Tilt Capital, that exclusively invests in blockchain. So this is both protocols, tokenized securities, infrastructure, we previously were one of the most active venture funds in the U.S., but made the switch at the beginning of this year to exclusively focus on blockchain.
Awesome. Just in case you're wondering why Pomp is not on the screen, he's having some issues with camera. He's not hiding or anything like that, and we just decided to go live to make the most of the time we have with him. So let's go straight into the question. Unlike most other interviews where I've just kind of had a chit chat, this one we've prepared questions to get the most out of this sort of half an hour that we have with you. So the first question is, how do you evaluate ICOs and crypto businesses? What are the kind of core aspects that you can share with us, knowing that this is potentially quite a sort of sensitive subject?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of similarities between venture investing and investing in early crypto projects, right? So the key piece initially is the team. Right. And so making sure that you've got the right people around the table, both in terms of they understand the problem they're trying to solve, but also too, they've got the technical capabilities to solve it. And, kind of all those normal things that you would hear an investor, go on and on about. Make sure you've got a good team. Right. So I think that's one. Two is, critically thinking about the viability and the value that the project could have, right? So if I always tell teams that, even if you accomplish everything that you think you're going to accomplish, is anyone going to care? Right. So we want to make sure that not only is it viable to build the technology, but also it'll have value once it is built. Right. And then I think the third one is, when it comes to the blockchain space, you're able to actually look at the technical code, right, and say, hey, what's the quality of the code? How does the developer base look? How does the overall community, how receptive are they to this idea? And so measuring all of those things are important. They're not necessarily a binary indicator of success, but they definitely give us more confidence, when we see, hey, look, here's a bunch of people from around the world that are contributing to, a project that they're not being compensated for, but they just believe that the world needs this. Obviously, that gives us higher level of confidence in backing a team in a project.
Okay, so a lot of people talk about invest in blockchain rather than a cryptocurrency or things like that. So, what does this really mean to you? Is it even possible to invest in blockchain as such? Or like when you're investing, what is it that you think that you're investing into? Okay, team is important, but what is the kind of the tangible, real world asset there?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. So I break it into a couple of buckets, right? There's an infrastructure bucket, and there's hardware and software there. So hardware is all of like the computer chips, the mining, all that stuff. On the software infrastructure side, you've got everything from exchanges to wallets, and kind of all the traditional infrastructure, and then you've got the protocol layer. Right, so this is all of the interoperability, kind of token agnostic stuff that is almost the foundation of a lot of that software on the protocol side. And then you've got all the the distributed apps and the more like application specific software. And for us, like, I think that you can invest in any of those four buckets. we started out on the infrastructure side, specifically in mining, and we've started, kind of work our way up to, up the stack, if you will. I haven't quite been convinced yet on, finding really, really powerful distributed apps. I think that we're still in the infrastructure and protocol stage, and need to build that stuff out, along with developer tools, etc. And so that's really where our focus is right now.
Okay, so can you share a personal investment story that has a lot of lessons that you can derive from it, from real world, that's kind of stuck in your mind?
Yeah, so I think that there's probably two stories right now. I won't name the companies, but the first story is we invested in a business where we fell in love with the product and we didn't dig as deep on the team. And so the lesson there, it ended up not working out. And so I think that the lesson there was just, we're not running these companies or projects. The diligence on the team is the most important thing. And so no matter how much we love a product, it's not enough to get us over the hump to actually invest. We've got to fall in love with both the product, the market opportunity, and the team. Right. So I think that was kind of one. The second one is a company that's doing incredibly well. It's a venture investment that we made, and basically we were trying to invest in the company. We were one of the first investors to say yes, we're in, and a number of big name investors came behind us, and they crammed us down. Right, so they basically took away 2/3 of our allocation, and so my partner and I went back and forth on should we make this investment or should we not. It's not really enough capital given what we're trying to target, but we ended up making the investment because we thought it was better just to get in rather than try to hit the proper capital allocation, things like that. And the investment's gone incredibly well, and so I think we would have been kicking ourselves if we had passed on the investment just because of the check size that we could write.
Wow. So there's always like the bigger fish above the big fish.
Absolutely. So somebody's always got a bigger checkbook. Somebody always does.
Yeah. So what would you then advise to people who are looking to get into investing in blockchain businesses, whether through like an ICO or somehow even earlier on?
Yeah, so my general advice, and this isn't necessarily financial advice, right? But I think that it's just that most people shouldn't be doing it, right? And the reason is they don't understand what they're investing in, right? They are kind of guessing, or just like they wouldn't go buy pink sheet, penny stocks, right? They shouldn't be buying ICOs. Right. And so if you don't understand what you're actually investing in, that's not a good idea. Right. Then there's the group of people who tell me, oh, I know what I'm investing in because they read the white paper. And so they generally know the buzzwords and the general concept, but they don't actually understand. They didn't analyze it from an investor's perspective. They don't know who the competitors are. They don't know the market opportunity. They don't, they haven't talked to the team, all of that. So I say that stuff with one, my best advice is usually to, if you want to get exposure to this asset class, like give your money to somebody who's a professional at doing it, right? And then two, if for whatever reason you don't want to do that, then taking some sort of index approach is probably best for most people, because what it allows them to do is de-risk their investments while still capturing pretty significant upside as the market grows.
Okay, like I love the way you just answer this, like with full clarity. It's incredible. Okay, so what are your top 3 relatively recent ICOs and why?
Yeah, so I think for us, one company that we invested in that we're really excited about is a company called Storecoin. Storecoin is a payment network that essentially allows it can so if you think about Visa, does about 5,000 transactions per second. Storecoin can do exponentially more completely free. right? And so, I think that we kind of think of that as like a Bitcoin 3.0. And so if they're able to successfully pull off the technology build and implementation, we think that they can really build like a true payments layer that is fast, free, secure, and scalable. Right, and so I think that's the prime example of something where it's at kind of that protocol layer, and can be built on by a whole host of different people, and so that gets us really excited.
Okay, so one of the things that I've picked up about blockchain, because I've been sort of researching this for like 2 years now. I come from a computer science background and also business management as well. So like blockchain seems to span across operations, economy, finance, computer science, maths, all these things. And so one of the things I picked up from, is it Antonopoulos? You know who I'm talking about. So he said blockchain, for something to be a blockchain, it has to always be open, public, borderless, censorship resistant, neutral, accessible without permission, and usable without permission. And give and enable ability to innovate without permission to people and developers. Is this something that you see like every blockchain company having to sort of comply, quote unquote, comply with those standards and that ethos, or are we going to see more companies that kind of sit in a range of the kind of Ripple-like, from Ripple-like all the way to Bitcoin-like?
Yeah, so I'll refrain from kind of sharing my personal opinion, right? But I think what will end up happening is, I think we'll see a multitude of companies across the spectrum, right? And so while there is what I usually consider the libertarian's view of the world, right, where kind of exactly what you just described is possible, where we can almost take this technology and like decentralize the world, right? Maybe like that is definitely possible, but I think the largest market segment is actually going to end up being where we take the blockchain technology and we combine it with traditional finance, right? So this is in tokenized securities and kind of all of the stuff that we see today, rather than it be revolutionary in terms of we're going to go, get rid of banks. I think what is more likely to happen is we will take this technology and we'll help them evolve. Right, and so the parallel example here is, decades ago when the ATM was created, people began to say, "Listen, now because we have ATMs, we don't need bank branches anymore. You can do everything you want to do at the bank branch at this ATM." Well, I think it's the National Labor Statistics came out in the United States last year, and we now have more bank tellers than any other time in the history of the United States, and so. Yeah, ATMs are prevalent throughout the country, but we also have more bank tellers. And so what ends up happening is that technology, rather than disrupting banks, was incorporated by the banks and kind of helped them evolve into, more digital, more distributed, organization. But it didn't completely, get rid of the bank branches. In fact, it actually increased the usage of banks, which drove more bank tellers. And so I think that that's a parallel example of what will happen in blockchain with the traditional finance markets.
That's interesting you say that, because one of the projects I worked on was HSBC Global redesign, and one of their goals was to actually close down 80% of branches worldwide. I think that the fact that they still have lots of branches is just a reflection of their kind of inability to digitize themselves properly, and there's like a huge push there to go digital full on as much as possible.
Absolutely.
But they're still struggling to build a basic, iOS app that doesn't have one star rating. So it's just one of those things. So do you consider us to be now officially living in the era where data is the new oil, or are we still just mostly talking about that?
No, I think that data is incredibly important. I don't think there's going to be a point in time where we say, okay, now we're here. Right, I think that we kind of transition into it. We're pretty far along in that transition, but I think it'll accelerate as we keep going. And the beauty of data is we've been using it for decades. right? And it's nothing new. I think what we're doing is we're finding new use cases for it, and those new use cases place a higher level of importance, right, on data, and so it's got some level of like a compounding effect, right? The more data we use, the more valuable it becomes. The more valuable it becomes, the more we want to use it, and you kind of just keep searching for more and more data sets. And so 10 years from now, I think we'll look back and say, wow, we barely used any data, right? And I think that's how we look 10 years from today, right? We look back and we're like, wow, we use no data. So I think that'll just continue to happen as time progresses.
And so what's your take then on the whole realm of IoT and AI, and how does that play along with blockchain? Is it all interconnected, or do you see it as somewhat separate, or something like kind of phase 2, phase 3, or how do you see this?
Yeah, I think that there's companies, projects, and tools that definitely fall exclusively in, AI, blockchain, etc. Buckets, but there's definitely a lot of blurring of the lines and gray area. And so, with the companies that are really, really pure AI or pure blockchain tend to be the more technical projects, right? And I think that the farther you get away from the technical focus in a company, the more you get to like the blurred lines between AI blockchain, for example. And so it's actually possible for a company to kind of cross back and forth depending on the product or service. And so I spend less of my time trying to figure out, is this company an AI company or a blockchain company, and more about what are they building, and kind of what's the use case for it, and do I think that this can create value in the world?
So for those people, because there seems to be a huge community now of like we run a community on Facebook with like 1,300 members, and like everyone seems to be doing their own research, which they should be. But I've never seen anything like this in my sort of 20 years of being in this kind of digital industry, where like people just kind of seem to be analyzing another blockchain startup every other evening. And so since that seems to be happening, whether we think that's a good or bad thing for people, let's try and give them some sort of direction or guidance or some wisdom as to what kind of stuff do you recommend that people should be learning about when it comes to blockchain businesses, in order to kind of make a better call on these things. You already spoke about teams being an important thing, and probably analyzing the white paper by all means. But what else is good kind of broader knowledge that you found to be kind of valuable?
Yeah, so look, I think that there's a couple of things that you definitely want to do, right? You want to check the quality of the team, the advisors. You want to read the white paper. Really think critically about the different use cases. Check GitHub for the amount of activity and the number of contributors. You want to do your best to try to figure out if there's any sort of like discourse among the team, right? Any infighting. You definitely want to try to get a handle on the community engagement, right? And just see that, hey, this audience or this community is engaged. People care about this, and there's kind of a built-in user base for when the product launches. And I think that if you can do those things, it gives you a good sense of the early signals around quality for a project.
And so you said you have been investing quite a lot in the protocol layer for blockchain startups. Are you going to continue doing that, or are you going to now, what kind of stuff are you looking to invest into, let's say, this year?
Yeah, so we'll continue to build out our mining facilities. We're really excited about that, and I feel like we've got a good handle there. We think that there are still a few opportunities on the wallet and exchange side, so we've been looking in that space, and then pretty much everything else will be at the protocol layer. Everything from kind of specialized protocols all the way to highly general protocols that kind of span the number of use cases.
And so what do you reckon is going to happen with regards to ICOs in sort of near, mid, and long-term future?
Yeah, I think most ICOs are securities, and they need to be regulated that way. Every team that I talk with, I tell them the same thing: if you act as if it's a security, you'll be absolutely fine. right? So I think it's on the regulation front, just understanding, hey, here's the risk reward, and make sure you're doing the right things, and kind of having this white glove experience when you do the ICOs, and then I think on the other side of it, for investors, right? I think that there will continue to be a lot of scams and kind of bad actors that are exposed. Hopefully, investors begin to learn their lesson that just like you wouldn't invest in the penny stocks, why are you investing in this, right? So kind of only invest what you're willing to lose, only invest in things that you really understand, that you think there's use cases, high quality team, all those points we talked about, and so as both of those things happen on the regulation side and on the retail investor side, I think that they're positive signs of just market maturation, right? So as that market continues to evolve to something that's stable and mature, I think it's overall a net good for the industry, and ultimately will pay off.
So can you clarify then for us, because I'm not even sure myself, what does it mean that when ICOs are going to be treated as securities? What does that actually mean in sort of layman's terms?
Yeah, so look, according to the SEC, CFTC, et cetera, and I'm talking specifically in the U.S., most offerings for somebody who's trying to raise capital is considered a security, right? And a security comes with certain regulatory requirements, right? So most notably, you've got to do KYC, AML verification on investors, right? There's certain rules and regulations around promoting that offering. You can't just run around and tell everyone that you're raising money, right? And so there's a whole host of different components to it, and so I think that again, if you are unsure, right, whether it's a utility or security, if you act like it's security and abide by those rules, you'll be fine. There are definitely utility, tokens and ICOs that can be offered, but I'm not a lawyer, and I think that you've really got to be confident in your legal advice that what you're doing is it doesn't fall under those security regulations, before you kind of move forward.
Okay, awesome. That's very useful, and that's kind of been on the back of my mind all this time regarding ICOs, and not just wanting to rush into everything, go like, yeah, everything's going to be just fine, because usually in business world something complicates sooner or later, right? And so, can you describe to us into as much detail as you possibly can the world in 10 years from now with regards to finances and blockchain and all this kind of crypto world?
Yeah. Look, I can, let me describe the future. I don't know if it's 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, but I think that we'll live in a world where money is digital, right? I think that there will be multiple forms of value that we're able to transact. That's everything from kind of global currency or stores of value all the way down to national currencies and stores of value, and then even company specific, right? So it wouldn't surprise me if an Amazon, etc., has their own version, very similar to what a gift card is today. And so I think that you'll see that in something that's programmable. It's got fractional ownership. It's backed by a 24/7 global marketplace. All that seems to make sense to me. I think that you will see the coexistence of those digital currencies with today's what I would consider just like fiat finance system, right? So look, there's still people who walk around today without smartphones, right? Smartphones are super popular, but there's people who don't use them, right? And so I think same thing's going to happen in the finance world. And I think that you also see a lot of the blockchain technology deeply integrated into these financial institutions. So they'll be using it for all kinds of different use cases. And then the big kind of aha, I think that the finance world's going to have that is going to absolutely hit like an avalanche is going to be tokenized securities, right? So I think that every asset in the world will be tokenized at some point. And I think that there's a lot of traditional finance folks that I talked to today that either one, don't believe that, two, don't see the value of the tokens, or three, think that it'll never happen, right? And I think those are the exact people that are just ripe for disruption. And I think that's the part of kind of the meshing of like the token and blockchain technology with the old finance world that I'm most excited about, and frankly spend most of my time thinking about as I kind of look around and say, hey, where do I want to play?
So Nick Cowan, who's the CEO of Gibraltar Stock Exchange, said to me in the interview that by end of next year, latest, every single central bank around the world is going to issue their own crypto fiat, as I call it, crypto pound or Fed coin, all these kind of things. How do you think that's going to impact on things?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're talking today, a couple of days after the state Senate in the state of Arizona passed a bill that would allow them to accept Bitcoin to pay taxes, right? So it's still got to go through the House of Representatives before it becomes law, but I think what you're going to see is governments generally they take one of two paths. Either they say, "Hey, we're going to fight something," right? Or they say, "How do we basically make sure that we participate in that industry or vertical?" And I think that the government and regulators have already spoken when it comes to crypto. They're not going to ban this, right? And they're going to figure out how to make it coexist with the world that they're used to. And so, look, you still got to do the right things. You got to act, in kind of the proper way and be that good actor. But I think that's the green light for if you're a smart person who wants to be part of building the future, crypto's waiting for you.
Awesome. And just one last question. I've spent a decade of my life doing user experience design and making things as simple and comprehensible and accessible for people to access and use and understand. How important do you think that UX design is for the blockchain world, and where are we with all of that stuff?
I think that it is an incredible feat that blockchain and crypto has gotten this far with everything looking so ugly, right? And then, frankly, a lot of the UX and UI is horrible. And so, as more and more folks with that skill set come into the space, I think we'll see a drastic improvement, and that can only help both kind of mass audience adoption, and then also just deepens usability and kind of frequency of usage, right? And so I think that stuff is much needed. And I already see some of those folks starting to enter into the space. And so I think 18 months from now, we're going to be looking at products that just visually are better, more appealing and kind of from an experience standpoint are just better thought out and kind of, more enjoyable.
Awesome. Pomp, thank you so much for joining. We said it's going to keep it to 30 minutes. It's 28 minutes. Just tell us a little bit about how's your lifestyle these days? How do you spend your typical day?
Yeah, so I do a lot more reading than I used to. I've told all of my friends that when you're a venture investor, you just click through decks, right? And they make it really easy for you. It's like 12, 15 slides, and you just keep hitting next, and you read a little bit. Now I spend most of my day just digging into different white papers and then talking to teams, right? And so I actually enjoy this more. It's kind of a little bit slower pace, and it helps you really think critically about what you're doing. So I've got no complaints.
And if people are pitching a startup to you, do you still expect a pitch deck plus a white paper plus kind of what are the kind of typical deliverables that you expect?
No hard fast rules, but I want to see it all. Whatever they got,
yeah,
I'm happy
as
to.
much as possible.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone else for listening. Please like and share this. Let's make it viewable and seen by as many people as possible. Thank you so much. And we'll keep in touch on Twitter as usual, all that stuff. Your tweets are every single tweet of yours, like I want to kind of print and frame it. It's like, that's it. That's it. So cool. Thank you so much. All the best.
All right, brother. Sounds good. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.